all, how is Lucy doing? You know, how did she react when you told her about Lucy's law?
Look, she is doing as best as she can under the circumstances. She is obviously very pleased that I'm introducing what I call Lucy's Bill, Lucy's Law, as a 10-minute rule bill tomorrow in the House of Commons. And I also talked to her about her experience in prison. And she then told me about the good bits, the bad bits, and there is one element which is very concerning that we'll see how that, what transpires about that.
Okay, is this sort of under wraps?
Well, there is, she's been, by and large treated very well, but there is a serious incident that took place last week about which I have grave concerns. She's very upset about. She has.
Imagine waking up one morning to find your world turned upside down. Not by a personal tragedy, not by some catastrophic accident, but by your own words, fired off in a moment of anger on social media. Now, imagine those words landing you in a cold, gray cell where the air is thick with fear and the rules are written in invisible ink. You're not dreaming. This is the story of Lucy Connelly, and it's not just her nightmare. It's a warning for all of us. Lucy Connelly was a childminder, a regular woman with a quiet life. She's hardly the sort of person you'd picture as a political prisoner. But today, her name is echoing through the corridors of British power, not because of a crime of violence, but because of a tweet. Yes, a tweet, those 280 characters that many of us hurl into the digital void every day. For Lucy, one online outburst after the tragic Southport murders triggered a chain reaction that would shatter her life and send ripples through the very heart of the justice system. Let's not sugarcoat it. Lucy's tweet was inflammatory. In the aftermath of a national tragedy, she called for mass deportations, a statement that many, perhaps most, would call distasteful or even hateful. But was it criminal? Was it a reason to lock someone up for 2.5 years? That's the question that's now dividing legal experts, politicians, and ordinary people across the United Kingdom. While Lucy sits in her cell, the debate outside rages hotter than ever. Some argue that freedom of speech has limits, especially when it crosses into hate speech. Others, including barristers like James Bogle, point out the wild disparity in sentencing. Violent offenders, Bogle notes, often walk free with lighter sentences than those handed out for words. Words, not actions. But for Lucy, this isn't just a philosophical argument. It's a living nightmare. When political firebrand Richard Tice visited Lucy at HMP Pitborough, he didn't expect to find the makings of a Kafkaesque horror story. What he saw shocked even him. Lucy, a non-violent offender, had been physically dragged by prison officers, left with bruises that still blacken her skin days later. She was thrown into a high-security wing, surrounded by violent criminals, and locked down for 23 hours a day. Imagine the claustrophobia, the constant tension, the sense of being buried alive. Why such harsh treatment for someone whose crime amounted to a controversial opinion? Why the excessive force, the isolation, the psychological torment? Richard Tice was blunt. Lucy's ordeal is a result of a two-tiered justice system, a system that punishes unpopular speech far more harshly than actual violence. The message from the authorities couldn't be clearer. Step out of line and you'll pay. Not just with your freedom, but with your dignity, your rights, your very sense of self. Lucy's requests for compassionate leave have been denied. Her sudden relocation within the prison smacks of retaliation, a warning to others who might dare to speak out. It's not just about enforcing the law, it's about sending a message. And that message is chilling. But this isn't a story of total despair. Out of the darkness, a shaft of light has appeared. Richard Tice isn't just shouting into the void, he's taking action. Enter Lucy's Bill, a proposed law that would allow 500 members of the public to trigger a triple-check sanity review of any sentence that seems wildly disproportionate. It's an attempt to inject a little democracy, a little common sense, into a system that appears to have lost both. Will it pass? The odds are long. The establishment rarely welcomes oversight, but even the attempt is an act of defiance, a signal to Lucy, and to all of us, that she's not forgotten. While Lucy languishes behind bars, the wider system continues to creak and groan. Reform UK councillor David Buckley recently pulled the curtain back on the asylum system, revealing numbers that boggle the mind. Over 50,000 rejected asylum seekers are still living in British hotels at taxpayer expense. That's not a slip of the tongue, and it's not a rounding error. Those are people who have been told they can't stay, yet remain, while local families wait years for a place to live. In Buckley's own constituency, the council managed to build just 6 new council houses in a decade. 6! Compare that to the thousands waiting for a home and the hotels filled with people who have already been rejected by the system, and the disconnect becomes glaring. The Home Office's response: we inherited an asylum system under exceptional pressure. Translation: it's not our fault, but we're not changing anything. So which is it? Are we a nation that values justice and fairness? Or are we a nation where unpopular opinions are punished more harshly than actual crimes? Are we a country that takes care of its own, or one that leaves families to languish while the system grinds on, indifferent and unyielding? Lucy Connelly's story is more than just one woman's tragedy. It's the canary in the coal mine. When we start locking people up for what they say, however offensive, however hurtful, we cross a line that shouldn't exist in a free society. When the punishment for words outweighs the punishment for violence, we have to ask ourselves, what have we become? This isn't just about Lucy. It's about all of us. If the state can make an example out of her, it can do the same to anyone. Maybe you think her tweet was disgusting. Maybe you'd never dream of saying something similar. But do you really want to live in a country where controversial opinions are met with prison sentences, bruises, and 23-hour lockdowns? It's a slippery slope, and we're already halfway down. So what happens next? Will Lucy's bill become law, injecting a little sanity into the proceedings? Or will the establishment close ranks, hoping that public outrage will fade with time? One thing is certain: stories like Lucy's need to be told. They need to be shouted from the rooftops, not buried beneath the endless noise of the news cycle. Because this isn't just about one woman. It's about the kind of country we want to be. It's about whether we're willing to stand up for freedom, even when it's uncomfortable, even when we disagree. If you're reading this, you're already part of the story. The question is, what will you do? Will you shrug and move on, or will you demand better? Will you accept the weaponization of justice, or will you fight back against it? The answer matters, because today it's Lucy Connelly. Tomorrow it could be you. We like to think of Britain as a bastion of liberty, a place where free speech is sacred. But cases like Lucy's show just how fragile those freedoms really are. When the state can lock you up for a tweet, when bruises and isolation become tools of political punishment, we need to ask hard questions. Is this really the society we want? Are we willing to trade freedom for a little extra security, a little less discomfort? Or are we brave enough to defend the rights of others, even when we disagree with them? So what do you think? Are we witnessing the rise of a weaponized justice system, or is this simply the price of accountability in a modern democracy? Share your thoughts while you still can. Because if Lucy's story tells us anything, it's that the right to speak out is more fragile than we ever imagined. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, don't just scroll by. Stand up. Speak out. Because silence, as history has shown, is never neutral. And sometimes, it's the beginning of the end.